My name is Rosa Prince. I'm a political journalist. I work for the website Politico, which I hope you'll keep an eye on, has the indispensable London Playbook morning email. So I've known Liam for a long time. I'm trying to figure it out, but probably since just about when before I was at BlueSky, I was in the lobby of House Commons for the Daily Mirror, then the Daily Telegraph, so both sides of the coin. And I've also worked a lot over in the States. Liam Byrne, as most of you know, is one of our most eminent MPs. He was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and he is now chair of the Business Trade Committee. And we're also so lucky to be joined by Gary Stevenson, who's a very eminent economist. We're just been talking about Gary's books. We also a book that we should be taking out. His life growing up. Yeah, we're going to have a good chat about Liam's book. It is the paperback edition of the book, obviously, and it's such a great time for it for two reasons. One is we recently had an election and a new Labour government, that came in on a landslide, but I can't remember what the term is, something like a shallow victory with a soft underbelly. And one of the things that Liam's really been focusing on in the book is how inequality leads to the rise of populism. And we saw that here in Britain with the huge vote that reform attracted. So I think we'll be talking about that. And the other reason it's really good timing to be having this conversation is that we have a budget coming up in a couple of weeks. And I know Liam's been talking about whether the new Chancellor Rachel Reeves will be hammering the rich, whether it's now time for some wealth taxes. So I'm sure you'll have views on that. Maybe let's start with you, Ben. We're going to have a chat on what and tell, and then we'll throw the conversation open to you guys for questions. Why did you want to write this book? You've written other books before, but what was it about inequality in it?
Yeah, so it's a sad story, I suppose. So the origin of this book goes back to 2015. So I talked about before, my dad was my mum when she was very young, when she was my age. And that sort of tips him into what a lifelong trouble with alcohol. And he died in 2015. And that just kind of locked me all over the place. And for some reason, I thought this would be cathartic, but actually I started working with a street homeschool team earlier. And I was meeting people who, like my dad, had been hit by a twist of fate, but they'd not necessarily had people trying to catch her when things go wrong, and they'd ended up on the pavement. And about 2016, 2017, we had people literally dying on the pavement in Birmingham. And I was out one morning, and with one of the street homes teams, and for those of you who know Birmingham, we were just coming into the underpass at New Street Station, and we met a man called Richard, and he was lying on the floor in acute agony. He was a double amputee, so he was without legs. He was lying next to a wheelchair. And he'd been there for 2 days. And it took us about 2 hours to get an ambulance. And I just thought, what is happening to this country where you've got people lying on the streets like this, the days, and he was still in his hospital gown with a hospital tag on his wrist. And that really affected me very deeply. And it was about that time that our food bag team Hodge began running out of food, and we had to organise these food bag collection systems from my office. I had to ensure one of my staff, was actually just working on food bag collection. And, we would take these food bag collection crates to schools and churches and mosques and community centres. And we literally would go into schools to pick the food up. And you had some poorer schools in the country raising a quarter ton of food. And you would ask these little kids sort of their motivation. And we literally had 8-year-old children down Rock taking penguin bars out of their lunchboxes and putting in this crates. And, when you kind of work in that way with incredibly inspiring children like that, but then you see what else is going on, and you see how sales of super yachts and luxury cars and private jets were hitting an all-time high. And that's what just made me realise there was a moral emergency in this country, where you just had a division between rich and poor that I've not seen in my lifetime. And I suppose that's what then kind of took me into writing the book and with the ambition of just trying to describe what was going on, this moral emergency that I saw in places like Portugal, with the economics of how it ended up in the situation, but with the determination to try and write a book about solutions. And so I suppose that's what the book tries to go through, and it's through that work that I've met with human campaigners like Gary and a lot of the other folks involved with patrols of billionaires. And it's it's a bit funny being a kind of former New Labour minister, because you don't necessarily associate that brand of politics with an argument for actually the way we need to increase taxes on the rich now. But the way our economy has changed has been so profound over the last 14 years. When you got the top 1% most fundamental 41 times more than anybody else, I just think we've got to get around this. So that's it's a sad story, I suppose.
And Gary, how about you? Why is this an area you want to work in and think about and discuss?
My interest in inequality came from my previous jobs. I was very good at maths as a kid, and I really wanted to get a job in banking, not really know what it is. I got into London School of Economics, and when I was there, I won a competition and got a job as a trader. So I was an interest rate trader starting in 2008. Obviously, 2008 was the year of the Lehman crisis, the financial crisis. So our job was to basically bet on what will happen to interest rates in the future. And in that year, all the interest rates went to pretty much zero. So our job became basically betting on when will interest rates recover. And a lot of people don't know the story of what happened afterwards, which was basically every single year from 2008 till 2020, traders and also economists in the central bank, economists in the media, every single year they predicted rates would go back up the following year, every single year. And, 2008, I was very young, 21. You see this crisis happen, you don't expect. Then everybody says, well, next year things will get better. They don't. And the following year, people say next year things get better, and they don't. And I was sitting there on the trading floor beginning of 2011, and everybody was saying this year things will definitely get better. And 2011 was a funny time, actually. It's quite similar in a lot of ways to the last couple of years, where you had this inflation was starting to go. It was being led by natural resources, by food, by energy. And the economists are kind of trained to be like, well, that means the economy's got. But you were starting to see this real divergence, which Liam speaks about, which was from the perspective of the traders on the trading floor, all the numbers looked good. Unemployment was coming down, growth was going up, inflation was ticking up, which is a sign of like an overheat economy. But because I come from quite a poor background, I could really see that none of this was getting through to ordinary people. And I just couldn't understand how we were going to get this recovery in the economy when ordinary people just didn't seem to have any money basically. And I got called into a meeting in 2011 with one of the Citibank's top economists, and he went through the government financial situations of course, Italy, Spain, Greece, Portugal, Ireland, but also the UK, the US, Japan. And in every case, you had this situation where governments are going further into debt, losing their assets, struggling to pay their bills. And I couldn't help but see a similarity between my friends' families. What I saw in my friends' families was an older generation who owned property and a younger generation who would never own property. And I think that is really striking, right? What you have is a situation where the middle class is losing their wealth. The government is losing its wealth. And you sort of, whereas the economy it's not possible for everybody to be in debt. It's not possible for everybody to lose their assets. And in that moment, I sort of realized this is the problem. The problem is the reason people can't spend, the reason governments increase they can't spend, it's because they're losing their assets. They're very rich. And I was surrounded, of course, on trade for about $1 million X. And but this was, Liam's always very moving. It's very driven by a sort of moral message. I wasn't driven. My job was to bet on these things. And everybody was saying things are going to get better. And I couldn't see how things could possibly get better when the middle class was being bankrupted and the government was being bankrupted. So I put a massive bet on that basically the economy would stay terrible forever. And by the end of that year, I was the most profitable trader in the bank in the world. And that is, and they paid me millions of dollars on the back of that. And that is that's a thing to sit and think, make you sit and think, basically. And, you do the same thing the next year, you bet on disaster and you make millions of pounds again. And then you start thinking, fucking, maybe I'm right on this. And, and that's a worrying thing. And, I decided at the time that if there was no action on inequality specifically, the economy would get worse in much. And that's, you can say the economy gets worse. What that means is kids can't buy out. Now, what that means is, in the most extreme case, which are increasingly becoming not rare, parents can't feed their kids, people can't pay the rent. And I think inequality is the cause of it, basically. So I quit that job, and for the last sort of 10 years now, basically, I've been trying to figure out ways to convince people that inequality is a core problem. And I've done lots of things. I've got a YouTube channel, wrote books in March, and I spoke at an event maybe 2 years ago, which I bigly attended. It was nice to see somebody who I felt, and I hope it's true, and I believe it's true, genuinely cares about this because they think it's a cause of the problem. So that's why I stayed in touch, and I was very pleased to see them write this book because for me, I think it is a moral issue, but it's not just a moral issue. In my opinion, it's the central economic issue of our time, and if we don't fix it, things get worse. So I'm trying to fix it.
And what's been going on there? I mean, you were literally at the heart of government, as you said, during the New Labour years. Were you all blind to it before, or did it seem the natural order of things? I wasn't more attention paid to this before.
So there was a moment at in the last 6 months of Gordon's tenure when so I'd gone to the White House and we'd met and Joe Biden's economics team, and they were the team that was running something called the Middle Class Task Force, and we thought, well, that sounds quite interesting. What's that about? And they were basically looking at how growth in America had decoupled from living standards. So living standards are flat, but growth is continuing to rise. And I got home and I said to Alice Adano, God rest his soul, look, I've got a sneaky suspicion that something like this is going on here. We should set up the Middle Class Task Force to look at this. And he said that we're 4 months out from the election. There's no way on earth you're doing that. Thanks very much. But you can have a team in the Treasury going to look at this problem. And we uncovered what became known as the squeeze middle. So it became quite famous in British politics. But we did have this problem. Okay? You basically had a situation, as Gary describes, where you've got growth in the economy going up, but actually living standards are staying flat or falling for most people because the growth is being hoovered up by those in the top. And there's a few things going on there economically. So you've got the rise of superstar firms. You've got the rise of what I call in the book technopolies. But you've also got this other extraordinary thing. You've got £850 billion of quantitative easing. It's kept interest rates down. And if you happen to own assets, you just hit the lottery. And so that's why, on average, the top percenter has increased their fortunes by 2.2 million in the last 40 years. It's 41 times more than everybody else. I don't know you, Red British, stand of turn. So we have, it's not very long actually, it's only a page. It's a summary, it's not a full return. Last year, 2 million income, tax rate, 23%. So in a way, when you look at it, when you look at the structure of a marketplace, when you look at what's happened to the monetary system, then when you look at the tax rate, it would be a bloody miracle if the rich weren't getting richer. And that's exactly what's happening.
What do you think, Gary? Who are the bad guys of the piece here? Was it just something that crept up on us?
I don't like to point out bad guys. There's a part of the book which is really interesting. She's sort of, I'm an economics student, I know you study this on as well. I've read the book, so I know you're very interested in it. That talks about how we move towards this sort of obsession with lower tax rates and how it sort of came to dominate economics. I study economics. The most sort of striking thing for me about the study of economics nowadays is there's no distribution. There's no distribution. There's no distribution. And most people who are prestigious in economics will have spent 20 years studying in aggressive depth, very, very complicated mathematical models. There's no distribution. And I don't think that makes them bad people, but I don't think it's a surprise then that when you have a crisis, which is at its heart, the crisis of distribution, they failed to understand how serious it is. And they failed to fix it. I think what I see basically now is an economy that has cancer, that is continually being diagnosed as a series of seasonal colds. because they don't really consider exist. And this inequality will get worse and worse and worse and worse. And you have this economics establishment that has been aggressively trained to never think in terms of inequality. I mean, somebody like myself or Liam stands up and says, maybe the cause of this inequality. You might as well be saying God did it. Because these guys, there is no inequality in their training. And what does it mean for these people whose entire career is based on 20, 30 years of studying models with no inequality, if inequality is a problem? They've got a massive vested interest not to think about it in these terms. So I don't like to, think about it in terms of villains. I've got a YouTube channel and I put a lot of things that Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister and as Chancellor. I've never met the guy. He might be a nice guy. He'd probably say more about that than me. There's no point putting out the villains because the villains aren't going to fix it. It has to be ordinary people. At the end of the day, a class of inequality looks fantastic from the top. It is the people at the bottom and increasingly the people in the middle who suffer. So it doesn't matter. We could name 10 million here. It's not going to help. What we need to know is how do we fix it?
And do you think Labour, this new Labour government and its leader Keir Starmer, do you think they get it? Do you think that they see this inequality and have commitment to fixing it?
So if I'm totally honest, I think they feel conflicted. So I think, most cabinet has come through similar kind of constituency experiences to mine. And they have seen, that bite austerity up close and personal. And so I think in their moral core, they absolutely get it. And I think the challenge they got is coming into power after 14 years in opposition. There is an anxiety. So you've got, if you read Pilgrim's Progress basically talks about two fundamental human instincts, or hope and fear. And hope gives you energy and fear gives you caution. And in a way, that's the kind of wrestling match. The angels and the demons are the kind of core of this government. But, we have to kind of just hammer home the peril that we're in now, because countries that are unable, as Gary said, this is not going to fix itself. Left to itself, this is going to get much worse, much faster. And, countries that are bedeviled by inequality have three things that go wrong. So growth is slower. So we know that. That's the IMF, the World Bank, OECD all now can show that. But you can tell stories about the kind of wealth porn that we see now, and you can see a lot back in the media and in our culture. But it's not the conspicuous consumption that should worry us. It's the inconspicuous consumption. So when you have countries that are very unequal, the spillover into politics is dangerous. And I have never seen big money stock corridors of Westminster in the way that I have now. And it's insidious. So it's not just, people providing gifts to people or making donations. It's people setting up TV studios, TV channels. It's people hiring politicians as presenters. It's people putting money into think tanks. The influence of big money in Westminster now is really very dangerous. But the other thing, and this was the analysis of Juice the weekend, is the countries that are unequal, where people get left behind, both are populists. And so if you looked at those places where the reform vote is strongest, they are the places that are really left behind. That wrecks stability in politics, and it means politics becomes much more febrile, much less stable, much more risky, I would say. So, people like me have got to kind of keep hammering home this kind of message that this is dangerous. It's terrible for our economy. It's terrible for people in this country, but it is really dangerous for politics too.
Now, but before we begin to try and think of some solutions to this, can I ask the fundamental question, which is when we're told, the Conservatives, for example, when we talked about Tamsin and old dogs or whatever it might be, would say, or hiking up rates for businesses, well, we can't do that because these companies will just go abroad, will lose their tax revenue. It's a really bad thing. Can one country tackle inequality on its own?
Possibly, yes. But I don't see why they should have to. These problems that we're talking about are in no way at all UK specific. I would love to think that, myself and Liam would drive the charge for fixing global wealth inequality here in Britain. it's unlikely that the UK will be the world leader. There's really one time in recent history where wealth inequality significantly decreased, which is the aftermath of World War II. And I don't think it's at all a coincidence that coincided with a massive increase in broad living standards. And it happened internationally. I'm British, I'm born and raised in this country, I love this country, I want inequality spares in this country. We get messages all the time. It's the same in Australia, it's the same in America, it's the same in Germany, it's the same in Italy, it's the same in Spain. This is a global problem. And look, if it came down to it and the UK's only choice was to do it alone, then I think you've got no choice but to try. Because the alternative is collapsing living stats. If we don't do anything, we will lose the middle class. And countries that don't have a middle class look like India, they look like South Africa, they look like Nigeria, they look like Colombia. And that's what we would look like. And don't think it can't happen here because it was like that here 100 years ago. I think it would be possible. I think it would be difficult. But I don't want to do that. I want to do it together with other countries because these problems we're talking about, low wages, rising cost of living, unaffordable housing, ordinary living standards, they're happening in every country in Europe. They're happening in the States. They're happening in Japan, happening in Australia.
So, Gordon, can we do something? What can we do to stop this?
So, no, I think Gary's right. So, and there are some signs of progress. So President Biden's efforts to introduce a global minimum corporation tax. If you look at some of the combined action now on money laundering and the tax evasion, the tragic reality is it took the invasion of Ukraine to trigger some of that international coordination now that's beginning to track assets. But, the progress is slow. I was traveling this summer through the corpuses and, you look at the kind of sanction evasion that's going on there. So, there are still big problems, but you've got a political will there now to try and coordinate action to stop people evading taxes in a way and that we've not seen before. But you also see problems that undermine this effort. So you can see now lots of countries beginning to invest in what they call industrial policy. Those are basically a lot of corporate subsidies. And a lot of countries are making those investments without thinking, right, is this just going to go out the door to the guys on top or to the shareholders? Or is it actually going to produce a pay rise, work on the shop floor? And there's not, Gary's point about distributions is absolutely right. So there's some more international cooperation on things like labour standards, on things like decarbonisation, on tax policy, clamdale tax evasion.
What about you, Gary? What would you like to say? If Rachel Reeves is sitting there tonight, we want to know her budget. What 2 or 3 measures should she have in there to help ease inequality?
To be honest, I don't really think too much about that because I'm not very hopeful for what we get in this budget. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're going to win this battle yet. I don't expect anything from this they've got in terms of inequality. And that is not because I dislike Labour, it's not the fault of Labour. Listen, we have a centre-left party in Germany, was in the party in Spain, was in the party in the States. None of them have done anything serious about inequality. And this is a result of the deeper problem, which is there's this kind of intellectual class which simply does not understand that that's the problem. And until you fix that, listen, the rich will fight this, and they've got a lot of money to fight. And this is why, in the run-up to this budget, you're seeing an unprecedented run in the media of stuff saying you can't tax the rich, to be taxing the elite. To be honest, when I see that, I'm happy. Because I've been fighting this fight for 10 years, and we never used to get that. And the reason they get that is because they know that increasingly we're a threat. They know that we might get this because the public are losing faith in the status quo. And really, the status quo will fight on for a bit longer. And I kind of see, to be honest, this Labour government as kind of, it seems like, and it's not at all specific to this Labour government, the centre-left dukes, they can censor their way out of this. They can't. You can't censor your way out of cancer. You need to fix the equality, and they won't. So the public sees that it's failing, and they want an alternative. And there's only really 2 alternative voices in the room, which is you need to tax the rich more. And the fact that the media is now pushing back against that shows that we are a voice, which shows that we made massive progress. And there's the other voice in the room, which is the problem with foreigners, the problem with immigrants, get rid of the foreigners, get rid of the immigrants. And one of us is going to win because the censor will not succeed on the economy. So I think that the fact that the media is pushing against us is good, but we are not in a space to get anything now because that intellectual class does not exist. So I work towards winning this in 5 years, 10 years, because I think that's the only chance we'll win it. So And there's two sides to that, which is number one, convincing the public that's the problem, which is you can see that support because the media focus on it. Convince that intellectual class is the problem, and I'm absolutely in job because then I'm a big fan, mate. And the second is technically bringing the tax in, but we're not going to get if we get a little bit now, that's a win. But I campaign for 1% wealth tax on the rich. The rich make 5% a year. That wouldn't be enough to stop, and we know we're getting that. So to get the level of change we need has to be a long-term project, and for me, that project has to be based in winning with debate about getting people to understand that inequality of the housing. For me, that's correct.
Were you more optimistic about?
Well, only because I've written a book. And so, I mean, the book was, the timing of the book wasn't an accident. So the hardback came out in January, and a lot of people said to me, so is this your manifesto? I said, well, yes, but it's not just a manifesto for this election. Yeah, but Gary, I think this is a two-term project. I'm more optimistic than Gary for a couple of reasons. So, one, when Labour launched this manifesto, it made a big play to say this is going to be a revolutionary wealth creation. And the question that has to follow that is, okay, wealth creation for who? It's got to be for the many, not the few. And when you think, therefore, about how you do that for many or a few, that's what then took me to the ideas in the book. So lots of people, for example, have talked about this idea of universal basic income. Actually, I discount that. So what is really needed is universal basic capital. You have to make sure that people are able to buy a house. You've got to make sure they've got short-term savings, that they can train and retrain, invest in their own human capital. You've got to make sure that they can invest in a pension. You've got millions of young adults living with their parents. The wealth inequality in our country is really, really bad. And so what universal basic capital does is say, look, let us build a national wealth fund that is very big. We didn't do that with multi oil. That was an error. If we'd done what the Norwegians done and put the money from oil in a wealth fund, they'd have £500 billion of investment. But that moment's gone. Let's think about how you do it again differently. Wealth taxes are key to building that fund. But once you get to a fund that is about 200 billion, that is enough to give every young person £10,000 in a dividend they had at the beginning of their lives, pay into a universal savings account, build that fund up nationally through fair taxes on the richest. And that is something that can work. And you know it can work because the ideas that I draw on in the book had all happened somewhere. So in a way, the book is a provocation because the book is to say to policymakers, okay, look, we all agree wealth inequality is a problem. We all agree it's not going to fix itself. It's going to get worse and left for itself. There are ideas going around the world that you could assemble into a system that would make a difference. Maybe these ideas are wrong. But okay, if they're wrong, tell me what's better. And that's the debate that we're trying to force as our both party right now. And that's why I'm kind of cautiously optimistic. But it's going to take good people arguing the case for what was an old ideal, because the wealth-funding democracy.
I think what you're saying is actually there is a problem. It's not all right for the rich to get rich and therefore to be a safety net for everyone else, because just the sheer fact of inequality causes its own problems. So is that right?
That's pretty right. So
the rich shouldn't be getting richer.
So there are two problems with that analysis, which goes back to the very beginning of the New Labour days. So problem one is that if the rich are getting richer by screwing down everybody else, which is, I'm afraid, a lot of what is happening, then that is a problem. But second, guess what? When you look at the effective average tax rate that those who are the richest in our country pay, it is lower than the standard rate of tax. And that tells you something. It tells you that the richest will tend to avoid their taxes. And actually, it was most fun in the book to write was going into all the American research about what happens to brain chemistry in super rich. And actually, a lot of the evidence is coming out of Midwestern California and does show that actually your brain chemistry changes. And actually, you do become kind of there is a lot more selfish behavior prevalent. And they've done lots of games to sort of prove it. That's the peril.
Gary talked about immigration and Lid's written about, we've been thinking about the rise of reform. What's the answer, though? Because we were told after the Brexit referendum, well, that's the elites class for ignoring this cry from the working classes that they weren't being listened to and their concerns weren't being addressed. Labour has this challenge now on the floor. I think it came before, only got 5 MPs this time around, but I think came second in, is it 83? We're looking less than 5 years now to the next election. How does a centre-left party address that threat?
I think it's very simple. You have to deal with collapsing living standards, because it's as simple as that. It's I think sometimes there is a problem, which is that not so many MPs or people in the media have experienced poverty and are a little bit out of touch for what's happened. The collapsing living standards in the last 5 years is enormous. It is enormous. I think that has a problem. That this is one of the problems with inequality. One of the big problems with inequality is that you end up with an elite class that basically live in a different world from the rest. And the level of financial insecurity, and Liam spoke about homelessness, and homelessness is a disaster. That is the tip of the iceberg. That is the tip. For every one person on this, there's 20 people who are one paycheck away from it. And they're worried about, my sister can't pay the rent. You know what I mean? She got 2 degrees. This is normal now. This is not, I think, it has to be that. It has to be that. If you want to stop the far right from winning power in the long run, you simply have to stop the collapsing living standards and the financial insecurity, which people are scared of, and they are right to be scared of, because their living standards are collapsing. They don't want a ship which is sinking. And the politicians, most of them, are not on that ship. They are on that ship. They are at the top of a mountain, living lives of rented luxury. It's a very simple answer. You have to stop the collapse in living standards and rising financial insecurity.
Do you agree? And you don't take on the rhetoric, and you don't sort of make the...
Well, I think Liam, I know as a bit, what you could hear from his speech, I think he has a bit of a better understanding of what's happening, actually, than some parts.
I had this, of all people, I had this debate with Anne Widdicombe today, or sex. And, I've been looking at the reform vote, what motivated you to vote for reform. And one of the striking statistics I finally got was 73% of reform voters don't think that ordinary working people get their fair share of the nation's wealth. That tells you that a lot of the motivation to reform voters is actually they're trying to break what they see is a rigged system. And I sort of put this point to Anne, and I said, look, actually, you're going to have to raise taxes on some of the luckiest in order to pay for some of the change. She challenged me on that. I said, look, hang on, there's a test. Is it right that Rishi Sunak pays 23% tax? To which she said, well, how on earth does he do that? She may pay 40% tax, which is what she said on the telly this afternoon, where she could not justify somebody like Rishi Sunak paying 23% tax, and nor could she understand how that happened. And that kind of lights up the problem. I mean, she's a reform politician. She's an watch reform. So I just think that ultimately, unless you take on the economics and deal with the economic insecurity that is part of why so many people vote for reform, then you're not going to get meaningful change. But my warning is that if we don't act now, wealth inequality is going to get so much worse, so much faster, that threat from the populist is going to get 10 times worse.
Can we talk about something I found really interesting in the book, which is about the generational sort of hoarding of wealth in this country? I wondered what you felt about our care system and the impact that has. I mean, obviously, you talk about how the baby boomers was, the lucky generation, they called their houses, they had their last jobs, they had their voluntary pension schemes. Is that now going to be sort of ebbing away because they're going to lose their money in high care costs? So they're living longer, and the rates of care are going up and up and up. Isn't that sort of the way? They're not that lucky in a way.
But they have got a national health service, and they have got good pensions, and they have got kids on who fall the burden of caring responsibilities, particularly women. And I think until we build a social care system and until we build a childcare system, and actually you're not going to free women in this country, and it is likely to bear the caring responsibilities and to fulfill the full measure of their capital. But that isn't free, it's expensive. And the question has got to be, well, where does that money come from? Now, what's interesting about the wealth tax debate is that if I think back 5 years ago, it was quite a thin debate. There wasn't a lot of ideas on the table. But now you can go through changing the UCOS and UNDOT, tax breaks on rich pension savers, wealth tax. I mean, you've got now about 10 ideas. Obviously, if you did all of it, you'd raise about 60 billion a year, and you might slow down the investment of the economy. But a judicious mix of lots of postings, actually, that's 10 to 20 billion a year. Actually, that's quite a lot of cash. So the debate on tax reform is now in a completely different place. Are we going to get it all done on the 30th of October? No, of course not. But that's why, in a way, this debate is only in its infancy.
Do you agree, Gary? Are these things linked? Our NHS, our care system, our childcare arrangements?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If you as an individual go from being relatively wealthy to falling into poverty, you will find that quite suddenly you can't afford quite a wide variety of things at the same time. That's what falling into poverty does. There was a really good graph powered by Thomas Piketty, a French economic inequality a lot, looking at government wealth at the time. And at the time of the graph, I think I was at I went to a talk here in 2019. It had just fallen below zero for the UK and most Western Europe. Since COVID, that's collapsed. So, government wealth has collapsed. The government has gone from being like the big wealth holder to a massive debtor. So you can't be surprised if suddenly the government struggles to afford things. If you go from being a very wealthy person to having a wealth of like negative 200 grand, then you're going to simultaneously not be able to afford your rent, your holidays, your food. It's about wealth. It's a bit, I don't think it's a phenomenal naivety. Yeah, of course. For me, I sit and I see the people of not just this country, basically every Western nation, suddenly can't afford everything. And nobody seems to connect that to the fact that the richest people in those countries have seen their wealth explode. The most amazing thing during COVID, living standards collapsed, government finances collapsed, and we saw these amazing statistics about enormous wealth creation by the rich. And it's like, okay, so government wealth is collapsed, middle class wealth is collapsed, wealth of the rich has gone through the roof, and nobody connected the two things. It's one of the most amazing things I ever see. Of course, not being able to afford things is related to poverty. And I think this Mandelson quote is phenomenally naive. I mean, when the rich get rich, they're not magicians. They don't just create wealth. Okay, if the wealthy are getting rich in a society of phenomenal, massive growth, that's one thing. But if the growth is not there and the rich are getting rich, somebody feed the poor.
At the risk of ending on a sour note, what do you fear will happen if inequality is addressed?
If you look at some of the most unequal places on earth, they are not nice places to live. And the rich and even the middle class will try and retreat behind, fortress estates, basically. So social connections break down. A country in which social connections break down is a country in which levels of anxiety go up and mental health begins to collapse. So you get really bad social outcomes. And actually, Richard Wilkinson just updated the spirit level 15 years on with some of the data that just kind of underlines this. But the opposite of populists are separatists. So if you get populists elected to power in capitals, actually the reaction to that is that regions just sort of think, well, fuck that, I'm not having those guys run my country. I'm going to organise a referendum. I'm going to bugger off. Thanks very much. And so you do risk the breakup of states that once upon a time we thought are stable. So, inequality is like an acid that melts the joints of the whole nations together in the same way that it melts the joints of the whole communities together. So it's a political catastrophe. And of course, what then happens is that you get the rise of private power, where you get very rich individuals who are able to basically run their own transnational networks. You get organized crime groups flourish in the grey space, and you get the rise of private militias. So, I mean, you really are on a road to dystopia if you let this kind of inequality multiply and much further. And, that isn't going to happen overnight, but over 10, 20, 30, probably 50 years, There's no doubt that's the direction you're already in. And by the way, those aren't my fears. That is literally part of the scenario planning for the British military. So, this is not kind of me making up the risks.
So talking about dystopias makes me think of the end of 1984, where I think years or so in it, but probably misquoting, but I think somebody says, and the only answer is on the proles. Do you think, is this something that has to come? I mean, do we need to throw it our elites, or is this something that the people are going to be able to?
I'm here today, and I keep my relationship lead because I would like to see action from government. I've said today I don't think this is a fight we win in this budget, and I'm glad to see you agree. I'm in this for the long term. You need both. You need both, and in the world that I live, which is sort of talking about this, there's like 20 think tanks that lobby politicians, but there's nobody to talk to the public, which is why I decided to do what I'm doing. But you need both. I speak to Labour politicians, and they say we can't do this. It's not a vote winner. Well, we have to make it a vote winner, and I'm trying to make it a vote winner. I'm trying to dissuade the public, and I hope the public will read this book as well as people sort of in politics, people with it to read the book. You need both. 100% need both, and one thing I'll say is we will get change. We will get change because it's increasingly obvious to more and more people that the status quo is just not going to work. But that change could be good or it could be bad.
Thank you both. We'd love to hear your questions. Gentleman else as well.
So I think there's clearly a strong economic and moral argument for a wealth tax. Is it practical, or is it too easy for people to evade such a tax?
It's not practical, no, but it's absolutely essential. Who was that American politician said? We do these things. We send a man to the moon and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they're hard. If the people of a society choose not to do essential things because they are difficult, then this society will collapse. I make money every year betting our society will collapse. That is what I think will happen. And it happens because people in our society need to fight it. If the rich guys win, listen, the only power the poor have ever had, to protect themselves from the rich, is that it's a lot more. And that means you fight together. You fight. And if enough people say, listen, these rich people, they're not magicians. They can't teleport out of the country. Look what happened when suddenly we decided we want to tax Roman Abramovich. Turns out you can't put Chelsea Football Club in the bag and take you with you to Russia. These guys own your mortgage, mate. They own your mum's house. That's what they own. And we can tell, we've done it before. It was done in the aftermath of World War II. If we say we're going to tax them, they can leave, just tax the assets. And it's not easy and it's not practical. And the main reason it's not easy and it's not practical is because they own the media. That's the main reason. If the whole country stood up and said, let's tax them, and then you move to the Cayman Islands, well, we just tax the houses, we just tax the mortgages. There's a reason why Rupert Murdoch buys the newspapers. To convince you guys not to tax the rich.
Well, so the great irony of this is that if you go back to the very beginnings of British bureaucracy, you go back to the creation of the Doomsday Book. And the Doomsday Book is an asset register of the nation. So King sends out these commissioners to every part of the country to kind of cow all the pigs and cow all the sheep and figure out who owns all the land. And then sends another set of commissioners to check. And the problem is that we haven't done that for quite a long period of time.